Charleston White thought he won, then Atlanta answered. Charleston White stepped onto Atlanta soil, believing he had already won. But within hours, one explosive claim turned the entire city against him. He went live, looked directly into the camera, and bragged that he was responsible for getting Boosie Badazz's son, Tootie Raww, arrested. It was not presented like a rumor or a possibility. White spoke as if he had personally pulled the string, contacted the right people, and watched the consequences unfold exactly as planned. But there was one problem. The evidence did not fully support the story he was selling. Tootie Raww had reportedly been taken into custody after a police chase that ended near a wooded area in Atlanta. Authorities accused him of obstruction and possessing prohibited weapons. Those details were serious enough on their own. Yet Charleston White immediately placed himself at the center of the situation. He claimed Tootie had been making threatening calls and suggested that he had contacted officials before the arrest. Then he added the detail that made the story explode. He said he was close enough to watch Tootie run past his vehicle while officers moved in. That claim transformed a local arrest into a full-scale hip-hop controversy. Some viewers believe White had proven that his enemies could not intimidate him. Others accused him of exaggerating a police operation for attention. Reports soon emerged, challenging his version of events, suggesting the arrest looked more like ordinary law enforcement work than a plan organized through one of White's phone calls. But by then, the truth was no longer the only thing driving the story. The clip was spreading, the arguments were growing, and Atlanta's rap community was beginning to respond. King Harris publicly offered support for Tootie. Boosie's name was pulled deeper into the conflict. Phone commentators and artists began debating whether Charleston White was exposing dangerous behavior or exploiting another family's legal trouble for viral content. Every reaction gave him more attention, but it also raised the stakes, because Charleston White was not simply insulting one rapper anymore. He had mocked a powerful family, challenged Atlanta's credibility, and suggested the city's justice system was working on his command. What looked like another live stream victory was becoming something far more dangerous, a confrontation with an entire culture that was ready to answer him in public and in person. And before this story was over, Charleston White would discover that provoking Atlanta online was much easier than dealing with Atlanta's response in the real world. Where are you watching from right now? Comment your city and state below. Press 1 if you believe Charleston White exaggerated his role, or press 2 if you believe he really helped trigger the arrest. Subscribe to the channel, because the next chapter reveals what happened when Atlanta's biggest voices started fighting back. The arrest that changed everything. The more Charleston White talked, the more questions started surrounding the arrest itself. According to the account circulating online, Tootie Raww was not calmly picked up outside a hotel or detained because of one dramatic phone call. He was reportedly arrested after a brief chase through Atlanta that ended near a wooded area, where officers moved in and placed him in handcuffs. Authorities accused him of obstruction and possession of prohibited weapons, including a firearm, allegedly modified with a device capable of changing how it fired. Those accusations made the situation serious long before Charleston White ever entered the conversation. But White refused to remain a spectator. He claimed Tootie had been contacting him with threats and disturbing calls, and he suggested that his complaints had helped bring law enforcement directly to the young rapper. Then he said something even more shocking. He had allegedly watched Tootie run past his vehicle while police were chasing him. That detail made White's story sound almost too perfect. He arrived in Atlanta, accused an enemy of threatening him, claimed to contact officials, and then happened to be sitting nearby when the same person was arrested. To his supporters, it looked like proof that White always stayed one step ahead. To his critics, it looked like a carefully constructed story designed to attach his name to an arrest that was already happening. Reports challenging his account quickly gained attention. Sources cited by hip-hop media suggested White had exaggerated or fabricated his role in helping police. Witness descriptions reportedly made the arrest appear like a normal law enforcement encounter rather than an operation directed from White's hotel room or live stream. But White kept talking as if the argument had already been settled. He mocked Tootie, celebrated the arrest, and used every new reaction as fuel for the next video. Whether his claim was true, partly true, or simply amplified for entertainment, it worked exactly as controversy usually worked for him. His name became inseparable from the arrest. The problem was that Tootie Raww was not just another young rapper. He was Boosie Badazz's son. And the people watching were not going to treat White's celebration like harmless content. Atlanta's rap community was beginning to view the situation as something deeper than online trolling. To them, White had crossed the line by turning a family's legal crisis into a public victory lap. And once that feeling spread, the reaction moved far beyond the comment section. Atlanta starts fighting back. The first major warning came from inside Atlanta's own hip-hop circle. King Harris, the son of T.I., publicly expressed support for Tootie Raww and indicated that he wanted to help him regain his freedom. That moment mattered because it showed the arrest was no longer just a dispute between Charleston White and Boosie's family. A member of one of Atlanta's most recognized rap families had entered the conversation. Online, the reaction divided almost immediately. Some people laughed at the footage and created jokes about the chase. Others debated whether White had really influenced the arrest. But beneath the memes was a growing anger about the way he was publicly celebrating another young man's legal trouble. White had built his platform by saying things most people were afraid to say. But this time, the entertainment came at the expense of a family already facing serious pressure. Boosie Badazz had his own legal problems during the same period. He had been dealing with a gun case and the possibility of additional consequences. Charleston White saw that vulnerability and pushed harder. He celebrated Boosie's situation, spoke as though incarceration was inevitable, and treated the entire family's legal struggle like another episode in a long-running feud. Boosie's response was not an emotional live stream or a public threat. It was colder. During a conversation with DJ Vlad, he made it clear that he did not need an apology from Charleston White. That statement carried more weight than a long argument. Boosie was not inviting reconciliation. He was closing the door before White had an opportunity to explain himself within one trip. White had claimed responsibility for Tootie's arrest, mocked Boosie's family, attracted pushback from King Harris, and inspired reports questioning whether his story was even true. Every new voice joining the conversation made the conflict larger. What began as White boasting about one arrest was turning into a confrontation with a city whose rap identity had been built through loyalty, family connections, and public influence. Atlanta did not need everyone to agree on Charleston White. It only needed enough people to feel disrespected by him. That was the danger White seemed to underestimate. Online attention had always protected him because anger created views, clips, interviews, and invitations. But Atlanta was not responding like an audience. The city was beginning to respond like a community. And communities do not always separate words from consequences. To understand why White continued pushing, even as the pressure grew, it was necessary to look at the life that taught him conflict could be converted into power. The man behind the controversy. Long before Charleston White became one of the internet's most unpredictable voices, his life had already been shaped by trauma, isolation, crimen, and survival. He has spoken publicly about serious childhood health challenges and an accident that eventually resulted in the loss of his right eye. Because of those complications, he reportedly spent part of his early education learning outside a traditional classroom. But the event that defined his public story happened when he was 14. White participated in a robbery with other teenagers, and the incident ended with a man losing his life. Although White has often explained that he was not the person who directly caused the death, the crime brought a murder charge, and years inside the juvenile justice system. That experience became the foundation of nearly everything he later represented. White has repeatedly said that the juvenile system changed the direction of his life. After his release, he studied criminal justice and helped establish an organization called Helping Young People Excel, commonly known as HYPE. The group focused on reaching teenagers and steering them away from crime, incarceration, and destructive decisions. That version of Charleston White was complicated but understandable. A man carrying the consequences of his youth while trying to prevent other children from repeating his path. His past gave him credibility when discussing street violence because he had lived through the system he criticized. Then the internet changed the equation. White discovered that blunt opinions about rappers, street culture, politics, and social issues could attract enormous attention. His willingness to insult powerful people became part of his brand. Every argument created another clip. Every threat produced another live stream. Every backlash gave him an opportunity to explain, defend, or escalate. The same history that once supported his youth advocacy now became a weapon in public debates. White presented himself as someone who understood the streets better than the rappers glorifying them. He argued that his own past gave him the authority to expose hypocrisy, criticize destructive lyrics, and cooperate with law enforcement without shame. But critics saw a contradiction. They questioned how someone who benefited from intervention and second chances could publicly celebrate the arrest of another young man. They wondered whether White was still trying to save lives, or simply using the language of reform to justify increasingly personal attacks. That contradiction made the Atlanta conflict more powerful. White was not just a comedian insulting rappers. He was an anti-violence advocate whose most viral moments seemed to create more hostility wherever he went. And Atlanta was about to expose how dangerous that pattern had become. A career built on conflict. Charleston White's clash with Atlanta was not his first public war. By the time Tootie Raww was arrested, White had already learned how to transform confrontation into entertainment. And he had tested that formula against some of hip-hop's most recognizable names. One of his most widely discussed incidents involved Soulja Boy. White claimed that he used pepper spray during a confrontation after Soulja Boy, and members of his entourage approached him, instead of trying to reduce the tension afterward. White went online and joked about what happened. Soulja Boy responded by accusing him of being afraid. And the dispute became another viral chapter in White's growing reputation. The pattern repeated in different forms. White would make an extreme statement, receive intense backlash, and then choose one of two paths. Sometimes he doubled down and challenged his critics to respond. Other times he softened the message, apologized, or said he had been playing a character for the internet. On at least one occasion involving offensive remarks, he appeared emotional while explaining that the public persona people saw online was not the complete person behind the camera. That explanation raised an important question. Where did Charleston White end and the character begin? The answer became harder to identify as his platform grew. Conflict brought attention. Attention brought interviews, appearances, and money. The more outrageous the statement, the more likely it was to travel beyond his regular audience. Even when people hated what he said, they repeated it, reposted it, and helped keep his name trending. But real-world confrontations carry different risks. During a comedy appearance, White was reportedly involved in a physical altercation after arguing with people in the audience. He later said he feared for his safety and acted in self-defense. Once again, the story followed the same cycle: provocation, confrontation, viral footage, and explanation. Atlanta represented the largest version of that cycle. White had insulted individual celebrities before, but now he was targeting a city whose identity was deeply connected to hip-hop. He was challenging rappers, families, street figures, and cultural institutions at the same time. The backlash did not discourage him. It gave him more material. Every warning became proof that people feared his words. Every angry response helped confirm his influence. Every person who told him to stay away gave him another reason to return. That strategy worked as long as the conflict stayed behind screens. But once people began confronting him face to face, White's usual formula started producing consequences that could not be edited into a harmless joke. The city he had turned into content was preparing to make the conflict personal. When Atlanta made it personal, as Charleston White continued criticizing Atlanta, the reports and viral clips began suggesting that people connected to the city were no longer satisfied with answering him online. He was allegedly warned to stay away, confronted directly, and told that his presence was not welcome. Some circulating claims even suggested that people close to him had been affected by the feud. White addressed allegations that street-connected figures had attempted to ban him from Atlanta and Miami. He also discussed claims that a relative had been attacked. Not every detail circulating online could be independently confirmed, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. The conflict had entered the physical world. One widely shared clip showed White responding casually after a man in Atlanta confronted or threatened him. Instead of appearing intimidated, White laughed and brushed off the warning. That reaction strengthened his image among supporters. They saw a man refusing to back down, even when challenged on the same streets he had criticized. But appearing fearless on camera did not erase the danger. The more White suggested that he worked with police or provided information to law enforcement, the more deeply some members of the rap community distrusted him. That reputation became central to every new dispute. He was no longer viewed only as a loud commentator. In the eyes of his critics, he was someone willing to turn online conflicts into legal consequences. At one point, reports emerged that a rapper had been arrested in connection with threats directed at White. His supporters argued that the arrest proved exactly what White had been saying. People were allowing anger to push them into decisions that could destroy their own freedom. They claimed White had warned everyone that he would contact authorities and that anyone threatening him should expect consequences. His critics saw something else. They believed White intentionally provoked unstable situations, then presented himself as the victim when people reacted. From that perspective, he was creating a cycle where outrage benefited him, while everyone else carried the risk. Still, White kept returning to the same territory. The alleged bans did not silence him. Threats did not reduce his attacks. The possibility that relatives or associates could become involved did not stop the live streams. Instead, every consequence seemed to strengthen the performance. Atlanta had become more than a city in his commentary. It was now the central battlefield of his public identity, a place where he could prove that no rapper, family, or street organization had the power to control his voice. Then White shifted his attention toward two of Atlanta's most influential artists, and the argument became bigger than personal beef. It became a battle over the meaning of street culture itself, the war over the streets. The next major conflict began with a message that seemed, on the surface, difficult for an anti-violence advocate to oppose. Young Thug and 21 Savage became associated with a campaign encouraging yacht. The message was intended to move hip-hop away from cycles of retaliation and violence. Charleston White did not celebrate it. Instead, he questioned the credibility of artists who had built their success through music connected to street imagery, and then publicly attempted to distance themselves from that culture. In White's view, the campaign looked less like accountability and more like rebranding, after the legal consequences of that lifestyle became impossible to ignore. Boosie Badazz, despite his long-running conflict with White, raised a related concern. He argued that artists could not reject the streets publicly, while continuing to profit from lyrics and images connected to them. For one rare moment, Boosie and White appeared to occupy similar ground. Although their motivations and delivery were very different, White's criticism became especially personal when he discussed Young Thug. The rapper's high-profile legal case had already changed how the country viewed the relationship between music, alleged street organizations, and criminal prosecution. White argued that artists who promoted violence should face accountability, and that lyrics describing crimes should sometimes be considered by authorities. That position immediately triggered another fierce debate. Supporters believed White was exposing an uncomfortable truth. Music could influence young listeners while artists remained protected by fame and wealth. Critics argued that lyrics were creative expression and that using them in court could criminalize art, especially within hip-hop. The controversy placed White directly against people who viewed Young Thug and 21 Savage as symbols of Atlanta's cultural power. It also exposed the deepest contradiction in his public image. White claimed to oppose violence, yet his method of promoting that message often depended on humiliation, confrontation, and language designed to make people furious. Meanwhile, multiple hip-hop figures criticized the Unity campaign for different reasons. The debate was no longer a simple argument between White and Atlanta. It became a larger conversation about whether rappers could evolve beyond their past, whether audiences would allow that evolution, and who had the authority to judge their sincerity. White positioned himself as the person willing to say that redemption required more than a slogan, but his critics asked whether he applied that same standard to himself. After all, Charleston White had built his own reputation on escaping a violent past and creating a different identity. If he deserved transformation, why could other people not claim it too? That question followed him into every headline that came next. When controversy became the business, by this stage, Charleston White's public identity had become almost impossible to separate from conflict. Atlanta remained the center of the story, but his target list continued expanding across hip-hop. No name seemed too famous, no legal dispute too sensitive, and no public feud too large for him to enter. When Drake's legal battle involving Universal Music Group, Spotify, and Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us became a major industry topic, White added his own aggressive commentary. Once again, the reaction divided viewers. Some enjoyed his willingness to attack powerful figures without hesitation. Others believed he was attaching himself to whatever controversy was already dominating the culture. That criticism struck at the heart of White's formula. He did not need to win every argument. He only needed to become part of it. If fans supported him, they shared his clips. If they hated him, they shared those same clips with angry captions. Either way, the attention moved toward Charleston White. The strategy was effective, but it also created a dangerous dependency. Once an audience becomes accustomed to outrage, each new statement must be louder than the last. A normal opinion no longer produces the same reaction. The creator must escalate, choose a bigger target, or cross a new boundary. White had already argued with rappers, mocked legal problems, challenged entire cities, criticized peace campaigns, and suggested that law enforcement should use artists' words against them. The room for escalation was becoming smaller. At the same time, the distance between his advocacy work and his online persona was growing wider. The founder of a youth organization spoke about protecting young people from crime, while the internet personality gained attention by celebrating arrests and humiliating families. The motivational speaker warned against destructive choices, while the entertainer repeatedly entered situations that increased hostility. That contradiction kept viewers engaged because they could never decide which version of White was the real one. Was he a reformer using harsh language to expose hypocrisy? Was he a comedian performing an exaggerated character? Or had controversy become so profitable that the original mission no longer controlled the message? The answer may have been all three, but the strategy that worked in interviews and live streams was about to meet an audience that could respond immediately. There would be no screen separating White from the people he offended, no delay between the statement and the reaction, and no opportunity to edit the moment before it spread. When Charleston White arrived at Tugaloo College, years of provocation entered the room with him, and this time, the audience refused to play along. The room that turned against him. Charleston White's appearance at Tugaloo College was presented as a public discussion, but it quickly became one of the most damaging moments of his career. Standing before students at a historically black institution, White made remarks dismissing racism and questioning the importance of HBCUs. According to footage and reports from the event, he told the audience that he did not care about HBCUs because he had attended a predominantly white school. The reaction was immediate. Students challenged him, asking why he had accepted an invitation to speak at an institution he appeared to disrespect. The exchange grew louder as White defended his position. What might have remained another provocative clip online became a live confrontation inside a packed room. Within minutes, the event collapsed. White left the building as students followed him, and video of the chaotic exit quickly spread across social media. During the confrontation, he was reportedly heard making a statement, suggesting that he did not care about his own people. That line traveled faster than the longer debate, because it appeared to contradict the identity he had spent years presenting to the public. This was not a rapper responding to an insult. It was not a social media user threatening him from behind an anonymous account. It was a room filled with young people from the same community. White claimed to serve through his advocacy work, rejecting his message in real time. Afterward, White offered his explanation. He said he had been surprised by the event's format, the presence of media, and the number of students involved. He suggested that he had not fully understood what the appearance would become, but those details did not erase the footage. Once again, the familiar pattern appeared. White made an inflammatory statement, refused to retreat while the conflict was happening, faced a real-world consequence, and then returned online to clarify the context. The explanation softened the situation without becoming a complete admission that he had crossed the line. But Tugaloo felt different from previous controversies. White had survived rapper beefs because his supporters believed he was exposing hypocrisy. He had survived threats because he presented himself as fearless. He had survived offensive remarks by arguing that the internet version of himself was a character. At Tugaloo, those defenses became harder to maintain. The crowd was not defending a celebrity or protecting a rap brand. Students were responding to what they believed was disrespect toward their institution and community. The man who had built a career, claiming that people needed to hear uncomfortable truths, had finally entered a room that delivered an uncomfortable truth back to him. Controversy could create an audience, but it could not guarantee respect. When the performance becomes the person, Charleston White's conflict with Atlanta was never one simple feud. It was a chain reaction, connecting an arrest, a famous rap family, a city's cultural identity, debates about street music, allegations of police cooperation, physical confrontations, and one disastrous college appearance. At the center of every chapter was the same strategy: say what others will not say, force a reaction, and turn that reaction into more attention. For years, the strategy worked. White remained relevant because audiences never knew which person he would challenge next or how far he would go. But attention and influence are not the same thing. Attention can be created through anger. Influence requires trust. White's youth advocacy gave him a meaningful platform because his personal history showed that people could survive terrible decisions and build a different life. Yet every time he celebrated someone else's downfall, that message became weaker. Every time he treated a family's pain like entertainment, the distance between reformer and provocateur grew wider. The story also offers a lesson for hip-hop. Artists cannot glorify destructive behavior for years and expect audiences to forget that history the moment they promote peace. But growth must still be possible. If people are permanently trapped by their worst lyrics, mistakes, or association, then there is no path toward the unity everyone claims to want. Charleston White deserves the same balanced judgment. His criticism of violence should not automatically be dismissed because his delivery is offensive. Some of his questions about accountability, hypocrisy, and the influence of music are worth discussing. But a valid point can be destroyed by humiliation, cruelty, or reckless escalation. The most important lesson is simple. Conflict may create viral moments, but it rarely creates lasting solutions. Rappers, commentators, families, and communities gain more from honest dialogue than from cycles of insults, threats, arrests, and retaliation. Peace does not require silence, and accountability does not require hatred. People can challenge harmful behavior without turning every disagreement into a public war. Charleston White may continue provoking Atlanta because controversy remains part of his brand, but the consequences already show the limits of that strategy. When the performance becomes impossible to separate from the person, the explanations arrive too late. The audience remembers the moment, not the clarification. Now the final question belongs to you. Did Charleston White expose hypocrisy in hip-hop? Or did he push his message so far that he destroyed his own credibility? Comment 1 if you believe his criticism was necessary. Or comment 2 if you believe he crossed the line. Tell us where you are watching from. And make sure you like this video, share it with another hip-hop fan, and subscribe to the channel for more stories breaking down the biggest controversies in rap.